Hello, Dave. My name is Bill Hurst. I have a blog site. It's called supportthecenter.org. And what I do is I support centrist policy, but I also interview people from all sides of the spectrum. And I'm really interested in letting people know more about what some of the candidates have to offer, what their views are. And I know that you've been in the House, the State House, and now you're running for the Senate. This is 2018, November 2018, you're in a primary. And I really just wanted to explore some of the major issues that you see for the state and how you would tackle them. So why don't we just start with an open-ended question. What do you see are some of the major issues that the state faces and how you look at them?
Well, the state generally economically is on the upswing. We've gotten our unemployment numbers way down, and businesses seem to be strong. They're actually complaining they can't find enough workers with talent for the jobs that they have. So that's good, and yet that is a problem. That one, you need to address by education and training, strengthening CTE education along with more traditional education. There's a lot of options out there for a young student today, whether it might be just 2 years out of high school, some advanced degree or program, or it might be a 4-year program, but there are a lot of opportunities out there. So that's a good thing. Businesses need talent. Businesses need reliable, fast internet, so there are areas of our state where that is not sufficient yet. So
like here?
Yeah, like a lot of these rural areas, so we need to find ways to get that done. Businesses need, reliable energy. They need good roads. I think our roads do need some improvement yet, although we're starting to get there. We're seeing more orange barrels than we've had before.
I do see some more of
The
those.
funding is starting to flow for better roads. So, those problems exist. Our auto no-fault system is the most expensive auto insurance in the nation. Some people say that's not a problem because we're getting the best benefits in the nation. If you're in an accident, I think we're probably paying a little bit too much for those benefits, and need to bring those rates down. That's a challenge for our state. In the agricultural area, labor is our biggest challenge with having a tighter supply of migrant laborers. We're having to deal with a difficult federal program to supply laborers through the H-2A program. That needs some work. So there's quite a wide variety of challenges that we face, but overall the big picture isn't too bad either.
Right, yes. And so how do you differentiate yourself from your opponent, in the primary?
Oh, we are night and day different. I have got an experience level that is probably pretty rare in the state for elected office, in that I've run this business, Pagel Produce, for 40 years, and run my apple farms. That business experience is very helpful over that long period of time. The ups and downs, the challenges of meeting payroll, of satisfying customers, of getting your balance sheet to work. That's been invaluable experience that few have. But at the same time, I've done public service. Started out when the school board in Berrien Springs needed new members. Basically, our board was recalled, and a few members quit when they were in a financial crisis. So that was the start of my public service, and I did 14
years
there.
Did you stay on the board, school board at that point?
I stayed 14 years. Served as their president all 14 years, and really helped turn our public school system around in Berrien Springs. So I have, a ton of background in that very important area of K-12 education. I understand the challenges that schools face, and I bring that to Lansing. I did 4 years then as a county commissioner.
Oh, really?
So I do understand some of the local government challenges too. And I have leadership ability besides, basically being the CEO of a small business. Those 18 years
How many people do you employ?
I employ around 20, give or take. It increases during harvest. But, those 18 years of public service at the school board and county board, those boards elected me their chair or their president all 18 years.
Right.
So I think it shows an ability that I have to bring people together to accomplish some goals together. But that's not even the only differences between me and my opponent. I've now done my 3 terms in the House. Well, I'm in finishing my 3rd term. And so that adds up to 24 years of service. And she's in her first 2 years of service. So I have more than 10 times the public service, plus all that private background. It doesn't take away anything from her, but it just makes me a strong candidate.
So, it's really interesting because I'm interviewing people on my blog who support various sides, and especially people on the right will say to me, well, we don't want people who are in government already. We want people who are absolutely new. And I say, well, if you're going to go to a doctor, do you want somebody that's totally new? I mean, don't we want people who know the ropes? And can you just explain what practically that means, you're having been in government?
It means a lot in Lansing these days.
Yeah.
We've got the shortest term limits in the nation. So you can only do 3 2-year terms in the House. So next year we're going to have a freshman from the 78th. We're going to have a freshman, in the 79th district. So it'd be nice at least to have the balance of a more experienced state senator from this corner of the state. And, I'm far from a career politician. I think when we put term limits into place, we wanted real citizens to take some time off from their jobs and go to Lansing for a while and then come back and get someone else. Well, that's basically what I have done. I've kept my foot in my farms and this produce company, but I've also served in Lansing for these last 6 years.
Right.
So I'm a true citizen with a workaday job, but I've also chosen to serve the public in Lansing. So I think I have a combination of both a lot of experience and still being far from my career as a politician. I didn't put my 4 kids through college on my political pay. It was on packing and shipping apples and growing apples.
So, how else do you differentiate yourself from your opponent, maybe in terms of viewpoints or views on things, or?
Well, we're both Republicans, obviously, in the primary, so we agree on the majority of issues. I have voted with the Republican majority about 97% of the time over my 6 years. But there are differences that show up over time. I have become known in Lansing as a more independent voice. I really don't owe my vote to any group or any point of view. I take an honest, careful look at each bill and vote my conscience. And I guess that is a more moderate way of viewing issues than strictly an ideological way. I work out of very conservative principles, especially financially. But there's times when maybe a tax increase isn't a bad thing. If it's, say, for roads, we really needed an increase for roads. There's times when maybe a tax cut isn't the right thing, although those are unusual cases when you're a conservative Republican, but I've been willing to take votes like that when needed to move the state forward.
Well, even on the national level, when Republicans cut taxes, a lot of times it's with the idea that the state will take up the burden as opposed to the federal government. Someone's got to pay for some of the services that are out there that are being reduced, unless you don't believe in those services. And
Well, And
A lot of times people actually believe in the services when you ask them about it.
there's a big difference between how the federal government can operate too.
Yes.
They can deficit spend, so they can
Right.
take a tax cut and just go a little bit more in the hole that year and say, well, eventually the economy will grow, maybe is their plan, but we can't do that at the state level because we balance our budget each and every year. We cannot exceed our expenditures. Our expenditures cannot exceed our income.
Right.
So if we do a tax cut, we have to identify expenditure cuts.
Yes.
And that particular tax cut bill that I did oppose, that was a little controversial. The backers of the proposal refused to identify any expenditure cuts that would correspond. They just said, well, the economy will grow eventually. Well, that's the federal way of doing things, deficit spending. We can't do that as a state.
So in other words, there were folks at some point, when was this, they wanted to cut some taxes?
This was early in this current term. It's been a very political term. Our Speaker of the House is a friend of mine, but I mean, he's obviously very ambitious politically. He's running for Attorney General, and he's known that for a couple of years. So I think he and some of his colleagues thought a tax cut was a really good idea politically.
Yes.
But, and I could have gotten behind it had it balanced economically and fiscally. I was disappointed that they weren't willing to present a balanced plan saying, well, we'll cut these taxes,
Yeah.
we'll cut these expenditures. I thought it was more like, we're going to cut these taxes and the voters are going to love us.
Yeah.
And we'll deal with the consequences later. Well,
Right.
I take a bigger view of things than that.
That's good. In my view, fiscal responsibility is very important. At both the state and the federal level, although as you say, there are differences in the way they finance. Your opponent, I've noticed from her literature, talks about herself as being a true conservative, more conservative. What do you take that to mean, and how do you respond to it?
I've seen representatives in Lansing who just say, I'm going to vote the conservative line on every bill.
Yeah.
So as soon as a bill is introduced, I know how they're going to vote.
Yeah.
They're going to take the safe, politically conservative viewpoint and not really bother with the details too much. And then maybe it's a good way to get reelected in a conservative district, but I think our voters expect more of us than that. They expect us to take the time to analyze. These bills are not always black and white. There's pros and cons, groups that support, groups that oppose. And there's sometimes you have to cross the aisle and maybe work with Democrats on an issue. It's not always, I'm just going to do the conservative thing and make my conservative constituents happy. I have 90,000 constituents. They're not all from one political party or one. I have to do what's best for all of them once I'm elected.
Right.
Certainly I don't want to betray my Republican base, but I have to take a bigger view of the issues.
Right.
So it concerns me when someone says I'm the conservative, that they're not going to vote in any way independently, or they're going to follow the leaders. That's not always best. They're going to be able to be kind of controlled by the leadership, whereas sometimes the leadership doesn't like me too well up there, but I argue with them. I try to work cooperatively, but I take an independent view, and I'm kind of proud of that.
So really, in a way, you're really looking for votes from all sides of the aisle. If you get past the primary and get into the general election, you're looking for votes on your record.
I guess I don't really even consider myself looking for votes. I'm trying to do the right thing in my own mind. When I go to bed at night after working in Lansing, I'm my own worst critic. I ask myself, did you do what you thought was right, regardless of how the voters might perceive it the next morning? If you get a chance to go home and explain it, can I explain it to my wife and my kids, to my friends? And it may take a little explanation. Just the short headline of one sentence on what they voted on isn't always clear. So I'm my own worst critic. I want to do what I think is best for the state as a whole with each vote.
Can you talk a little bit about gun control? I noticed it on your website. It sounded like there was some clarity that you could maybe put around how your position on gun control and the vote that occurred fairly recently.
There was a vote. They call it constitutional carry, referring to the Second Amendment right to have weapons. We place currently some limit on your ability to carry weapons. If you want to carry a concealed pistol, you have to take a class, a safety class, go through a little bit of training, you get a license, and you can carry concealed. The constitutional carry bill would have eliminated that requirement for the safety class. So I'm one of those people who does support the Second Amendment. I own several guns. I actually have a license to carry concealed. When I took that class, even as an experienced gun owner, I've had guns many, many years. I benefit from it. I learned a couple of things about handling pistols I didn't know. And of course I learned the rules and the laws regarding carrying concealed. But I looked around the class and there was a couple of folks who seemed like, how do I load this gun? And we fired over 100 rounds each in different scenarios. I saw benefit in the class, and as I've talked to other gun owners, the great majority do also see benefit in the class. The instructors really take the safety thing really seriously. There are a few who disagree and say, no, the Constitution says you can have a weapon. Forget the rules. You should be able to go to the store, get a weapon, and put it in your pocket and go.
Is that really what the law would have done?
Yes. So I come down more on the side of let's keep that safety class, but let's also maintain our rights. I didn't vote to take away any of our rights as gun owners. I only voted to not go that extra step and remove the needed safety class.
Did the law, I'm not 100% familiar with that law. It passed, didn't it?
It passed the House, but it will not become law because it would also have to pass the Senate and have the governor sign it, and I don't see that happening.
Okay. If I recall right, it also allowed guns into places where they weren't for, or maybe you want about that, churches, schools, etc., or maybe it was just churches.
I would have to go back to that bill. What stuck out to me most was the safety class. And we do have limits right now where you can carry concealed. There is some thought that maybe if you take an extra class, or really, earn your right to carry concealed, maybe you should be able to carry in some of these other zones, particularly churches and schools. I'm open to looking at that if you took the extra class. My daughter's a teacher. If she had high training and wanted to protect herself and her school in a concealed manner, I would consider that. There are some areas where you wouldn't probably ever be allowed or shouldn't be allowed, like a bar, a sports arena. I don't think those should be changed.
National politics doesn't necessarily play a large role in the state, or does it? What impact does national politics have on the state? I'm just curious.
Well, some issues are totally separate, national defense, but I think immigration policy affects us a lot in Michigan with our agricultural community. I need workers to come in and harvest my apples in the fall, but I'm a small grower. Commercial vegetable operations they could need 200 workers in some of these larger operations. They need them reliably, workers who will show up and do the job in a reliable manner. And if we don't have a reasonable guest worker program on the national level, they are in trouble. I keep saying
Have you
that.
seen that from?
Oh yes, I've seen fruit and vegetables go unharvested for lack of labor here in Michigan already,
Really?
and fields get left behind. I keep putting it as simple as we have to import some of these workers, or we have to import more of our food, and I would rather bring the workers in. I've worked alongside of migrant families all my life. They were my friends on the farm who I played with as a kid and worked with as a young adult and an older adult. We have nothing to fear from good, hard-working migrant families. They're very family-oriented. They're the hardest-working people I've ever known and worked alongside. I can't keep up with them. They do a great service to our economy and to agriculture especially. And if we have a reasonable program to allow them to come in, be tracked, and then go back home, that would benefit all. And these aren't jobs that would be taken up by anyone else if they didn't come. We just wouldn't grow the crops.
Do you see tariffs? Has there been much discussion of the tariffs that are about to occur or could occur with cars, especially?
The tariff issue, the tariff issue has just come to a head recently with all the, there doesn't seem to be a plan. There's just, well, let's just put these tariffs on. There are very serious repercussions to some of this with agriculture. A lot of our products are exported. Soybeans, I understand, would be particularly hard hit. Why do we want to do that? I'm not sure. I think in general free trade is a good thing.
That's the traditional Republican position.
I think
recently.
I think we need to trade with other nations, and we really do when it comes to agriculture. It's a great export product for us.
Yeah. But I will tell you, in many respects, if you're in the center, I think in many respects you're conservative because you're afraid of radical change that may not actually result in a new system or a new world order, may result in chaos. Everyone's out for themselves. Bilateral trade agreements, now Europe is signing bilateral trade agreements with Japan and with Mexico as well, and we're not in those, so I know that the president has said bilateral trade is the way to go, but in the end, it's a slippery slope, and you may not get to where you want to go, and it becomes, one against all and all against one. It becomes a jungle. We established those systems 70 years ago and have kept them up. So I don't know. Hopefully, we replace them with something that makes sense.
I don't consider myself an expert on international trade, but this whole thing makes me really nervous, especially when it comes on the heel of some other controversy. It's like they're trying to change the subject. Well, let's talk about this now or this, and it seems to be not part of a coherent plan. It's just like, well, let's do this. Let's put a tariff on steel and aluminum next week. Come on, we've got to think these things through a little bit.
Also, we're attacking everybody. It's not simply one block and one nation.
The talk against our NATO allies, the NATO alliance, again, I'm not the expert, but that's one of the greatest forces in the free world right now is the NATO alliance. I don't understand the critical talk towards some of our friends and the friendly talk for some of our enemies, basically. I try to support the president and be a good Republican. A lot of this does make me really nervous.
So you think independently, but you have Republican principles. They are independent.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. In terms of other issues in the state, have you seen any big hot buttons? Is water supply a big hot button? I'm not really, 100% in the know on.
Well, there are water issues. There was a a bill by Representative Miller recently on like farms who withdraw a large amount of water, sometimes for irrigation, and changing some of those rules and regulations. And it was pretty controversial, and then he made some changes to the bill and kind of brought the different groups together, and I think the final product wasn't too bad. You know, the Great Lakes water, the waters of the U.S., more of a federal issue, but really affects farms. The pipeline going underneath the straits. Obviously we need the pipeline, but a disaster there is almost unthinkable of what it would do to the Great Lakes. A world valuable
So they're
resource.
talking about an oil pipeline in the Great Lakes? Is that
There's an Enbridge line under the Mackinac Straits that is concerned if it would ever fail. They've seen that it's been hooked by an anchor or different things have happened, and I think we need to study that carefully with good science, figure out our best alternatives. Obviously pipelines are great because it's a lot better way to transport petroleum products than trucking, but they've got to be safe, especially under the Great Lakes.
Are you involved at all, or want to comment on the gubernatorial primary on the Republican side? If you have,
I have not been involved. None of them have called me for endorsements. I don't think their campaigns are relying on that too heavily. I'm not strongly opposed to any of the folks on the Republican side. I know personally Brian Kelly the best, and I've traveled with him a little when the Flint crisis took place. I spent a day with him going around Flint and talking to folks. I like Brian a lot, and I know he's been part of the Snyder administration for 8 years, which has turned Michigan around. I think those are points in his favor. So perhaps I lean that way. But I haven't officially come out and endorsed anyone.
okay. Any other items you really want to mention? Other aspects of what differentiate you? When you look towards the overall race, assuming you get past the primary, what are some of the issues that you expect to be significant from a Democratic Republican standpoint?
Well, some of the issues are still the same. In this part of the state, agriculture is important. We love our schools, education, with the wide options from homeschooling to charters and traditional public schools and private schools. Keeping our economy strong. So those are still issues, but they're areas I'm strong in with my background.
Right.
I also have a surprisingly background in the corrections system in the state, just because I've been assigned to chair that committee for 4 years. So I've visited our prisons, I've been working on criminal justice reform. It's one of the things that excites me about going back to the Senate. Some of these reforms take 4, 6, 8 years to finally get them through the legislature, and some of the things I'm working on.
To understand the history of how they evolved, probably be important to not start from scratch again, right?
It's kind of a shame as far as the House goes that someone else is going to have to take over that corrections budget next year without any of the knowledge I have. There's a lot to learn. You're kind of drinking from a fire hose up there, especially your first 2 and 4 years, and you start to become effective your third term, and then you're gone.
How big is that budget?
That's a $2 billion budget of our $10 billion general fund. So it's our total state budget's over $50 billion, but we only really control about $10 billion, which is our general fund. And that's $2 billion of it, it's 20% of it, and I'd like to bring that down as a percentage.
What's the other $40 billion?
There are monies that come in designated. A lot of it's federal, for federal funding for programs, but even state money it comes in designated for roads from the roads tax, or for schools from Proposal A. So we can't put that in our general fund. Those are funds that come in but have to be spent for those purposes. So our general fund is monies we can choose where to spend on different priorities, and we run our departments from.
When you do run, if you do make it past the primary, do you see any other differentiators? I mean, mainly how the state would be run from a fiscal standpoint. You know, is that probably the biggest difference you see in the Democrat and Republican side, or what are some other things that you notice?
I'm not sure what the differences will be between me and the Democratic candidate, Ian Haight. I've only talked with him a couple of times. I believe, I could be wrong, but I believe he said he was a Republican, and he has kind of felt the Republican Party walked away from him.
Yeah.
So he is sort of a centrist guy himself, maybe center left, and I'm more center right.
Okay.
So I think we'll have a friendly debate. I don't think we'll be miles apart.
Right.
I will see things from a conservative bent, and he will a more liberal bent probably, but
Okay.
that doesn't always equate to huge differences in policy. On some issues, it'll probably be, you know, pretty stark. I'll probably be more Second Amendment and pro-life than him, but I don't know for sure.
Right. From a pro-life standpoint, does that actually make its way into state government in any way, or is that more a federal issue?
Honestly, there have not been a lot of state votes that it affects.
Okay.
It could happen, but I can't remember in my 6 years a big pro-life fight in the House.
Okay. Well, anything else you want to leave us with?
Well, I look forward to the chance to be state senator.
What's the difference between being in the House and the Senate? So how many senators are there, and what's the difference, and why have you made that switch?
Well, I'm termed out of the House, so I have to quit or go to the Senate. My opponent is in her first term in the House. She could run for the House 2 more times, but has chosen to try to jump up. There are 110 representatives.
Right.
So your majority party, the last 2 terms, we've had about 63 Republicans. So you're in a room of 63. It's a, you know, kind of a crowded room when you're making your decisions and setting your committees up. In the Senate, there's 38 senators.
That's a small group.
So it's about a third. Generally, yeah, there's 3 House members to the 1 Senate seat that I'm running for. So there'll be a little over 20 in the majority party, which will probably be Republican. You're a pretty powerful voice when you're one of the top 20 or so voices in the legislature. Be more responsibilities to be on different committees, maybe be able to chair more than one. I don't know. It is considered the upper chamber in that way. I think in the House there's a lot of collegiality where we try to be friends. There's a lot of talking. I understand in the Senate you're at each a little island a little bit more, and you've got a lot more constituents. You've got over 250,000 constituents as a senator. So you have a bigger staff. There's generally the biggest difference would be there's more experience in the Senate, because almost all of them have been representatives before.
Okay.
Some of them did their full 6 years in the House, and are now doing 8 years in the Senate, 2 4-year terms.
And how many days a year do you spend in Lansing?
This is a campaign year, so every other year you're up and down a little. It's always around 100. It'll probably be maybe 110 next year, and maybe dip below 100 a little bit in a campaign year, where you're actually in session, which is basically 3 days a week. So it kind of follows the school calendar roughly, but only 3 days a week. But there is a lot of work to do when you're home the other days.
I probably should have started with this, just a very quick background. How did you grow up? Did you grow up here, right here? Or?
I've been a half mile from here all my life. Grew up on a fruit farm. Did not appreciate it as much at the time as I do now looking back. Learning how to work, being outside, working alongside my dad, my grandpa, my brother, my mom, once in a while my sisters. just learning how to work and be outside, and it's part of a family. We were a church-going family. What a great place to work, to grow up. Sometimes we worked awfully darn hard on that farm, but that was great. I didn't know I was coming back to agriculture when I went to Michigan State. But after 4 years there, the farm started looking better. I came back, and a couple years later, I ended up starting this business, the produce wholesaling end of the business. I'm in the marketing end of things and the storage and such. But
Do you have large apple fields, or do you take in apples from other people?
originally, as I started the business, I didn't grow anything. I took the fruit from our farms that my brother and my dad grew, and I worked with several other growers. And I still work with quite a circle of growers around the state. And I also planted about 20 acres of my own orchards over the years with my family and my kids. My wife and I have raised 2 sons and 2 daughters here, and they're all college graduates now, and I'm pretty proud of that. Great young
They
adults.
working here, or they working
My one son works with me here,
Yeah.
and I have a daughter who's a teacher and a volleyball coach, and I have a daughter who's an astrophysicist. I have a
Really?
son who's a tennis pro. We're quite a diverse group.
Wow, that's a diverse group.
Yeah.
Wow. That's great. All right. Well, I really want to thank you for your time, and I really do appreciate you expressing your views, and hopefully a group of people watch this and know you better. So thank you very much.
I hope so. I like it when people take the time to get to know me better. I've got nothing to hide. I'm kind of what you see is what you get kind of guy. So thank you.